Hello, happy Friday, everyone. Thanks for joining our live stream today. This is our weekly live stream where we bring on interesting guests to talk about all things related to digital transformation. So thanks for joining us here today. We have a global audience here today and actually a global panel discussion or a interview today. And I'll set the context and I'll here just a moment. Apologies, I'm getting some feedback here. But what we'll do is today is as we get started here, if you have questions along the way, please feel free to drop questions in the chat. We're going to talk today about open source technology with who I would consider the leader in open source technology, which is the CEO of Odoo, which is a leading cloud ERP technology provider. And we're going to get to introductions here in just a moment. But as I mentioned, if you have questions about open source, about digital transformation for Fabian and I, please drop those questions in the chat, and I'll keep an eye on those chat streams as we're talking here today. Also, if you don't mind, just drop in the chat where in the world you're joining from today. I always love to see where people are joining. So whatever platform you're on, whether you're on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or even Twitch, we're streaming to Twitch here today. Be sure to drop in the chat box where it is you're joining from, just so we have a good understanding of our audience here today. Open source technology, it's an interesting topic. It's something that our clients ask us about often. It could be a good alternative to sort of your traditional off-the-shelf technologies, and also a good alternative to total custom development software. And so open source technology is a very real trend in the space, but also something that people have a lot of questions about. There's I would say, a lack of understanding in many ways for a lot of organizations in terms of what open source is and how it's different than other technologies, how it can enable an effective digital transformation. And that's exactly what we want to talk about here today is the pros and cons of open source and really just understanding where it might fit within your digital transformation. So with me today, I'm really excited to have who, by the way, is our first vendor to ever join our live stream, or our first vendor to ever join my podcast. I usually keep sort of an arm's length distance from vendors, but I thought this would be a really good conversation, a good reason to have a software vendor join the show here today. And just as one last caveat, we are not affiliated with Odoo. We're an independent consulting firm, so we're not a Odoo partner. We're not an affiliate, and that's intentional. But having said that, we have a lot of clients that evaluate and implement, and in some cases are already using Odoo. So I think having some conversation here with Fabian would be great. So joining us is Fabian, the CEO of Odoo. Fabian, thanks for joining today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I guess to start, just to get the conversation started, so maybe tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, the first comment I had when we got on the live stream today was that you look very young, and I know Odoo's been around for a while now, so I figured you must have been in high school or junior high or something when you started the company. But but maybe tell us a little bit about your background and how and why you started Odoo.
Yeah, I started very young, you're right. So I started at the university, and I did a lot of things, and this one worked better than the others. So I basically always worked for my own company.
Okay, great. And why did you start Odoo? And then I'm going to ask you questions about what Odoo is. But what was it that inspired you to start the company? What problems were you trying to solve?
I'm passionate about development and management, and that was a way for me to bring my two passions together. But mostly what I noticed is that SMEs at the time, and it's still the case today, are totally inefficient. You have a lot of people spending time on administrative tasks, recording data, doing spreadsheets to compute reports, and people are totally inefficient, and they really suffer from that. I mean, depression at work has never been so high. You can see a lot of complaints about the traditional ERPs. So I wanted to fix that, and I always wanted to fix like a big problem, like the kind of problems where you need decades to fix. And so Odoo was the perfect things to do for me there.
Gotcha. Okay, great.
I lost you. Maybe you should reconnect me.
Oh, sure. 1 second here. All right, do you hear me okay?
I don't hear nor see you.
That's okay, strange. What I'll do...
That is strange. Hello, hello.
So I guess just to start, I mean, we lost audio.
Okay, so maybe if you can type the question and I will answer.
Sure. Yeah, how about now? Do you hear me now?
Test. Let me switch to another network, maybe.
Okay. Well, we're gonna improvise here. I'm gonna type the questions to Fabian, and I'll obviously verbalize them to the audience here. So the first question is
So I believe we have issues with the internet of Eric or me. I don't know.
So I guess to start, I'll type him the question here. What exactly is open source software? We'll start there.
Okay, so Eric is asking me question. I hope people hear me, but his question is, what is open source software? And basically, open source means that it's a software that you can download, that you can modify, that you can change for free. And it's guaranteed that it's free from the license. So basically, it's come from the idea that knowledge should be shared, that we shouldn't create lock in or customers or on the software. So it's basically free and guaranteed by the license. Free to use, free to modify, free to distribute, and but having said that, the service is not free. From the rest, the service is like traditional software. So what differs from the traditional ERP is actually not that much. It's just another license. And for the rest of the service, so like the way you implement software or the way the software evolves from the software vendor perspective, the research and development is actually the same. The only difference is that we work with communities all around the world, but we have the same quality development cycle than traditional vendors, where we host our own core base and we modify it.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, so it's a bit different from ERP solutions in that way. But
so I still don't see you, Eric. Okay,
so
he's asking a question.
How
is open source different from low code or custom dev solutions? So basically, open source is just a way to produce software. It's not a business model. It's not the business model is the same than traditional software. It's just a way to work better with the communities and open to the world with a more open approach to everything we do and more transparent. A low-code approach is just having a framework that allows to customize the system without development. And we have that with Odoo too. We have an application that it's called Odoo Studio that allows you to customize all your application without development. So we do both open source and we do also have a low-code solution where you can customize your own application or develop your own application without development. That's very useful to adapt the software to a lot of different clients without going in very highly expensive budget, because development always costs a lot.
Perfect. No, that sounds good. And so it's almost sort of a hybrid in between commercial.
So when you are doing answering, okay, good. So it looks like you still hear and see me. Maybe.
And for those of you just joining, we lost the
connection.
If you
have other question, maybe what I should say is that Odoo is not fully open source. It's what we call an open core business model, where you have part of the software that is free, open source, which is Odoo Community. It's one of our products. And we have another product, which is Odoo Enterprise, which is for a fee. And so 80% only of the features we have are open source. We still have 20% of our features that are for a fee. So it's a mixed model between proprietary software and open source software.
Got it. Okay. Perfect. Well, I'm going to try and reconnect Fabian here in just a moment. Let me see if I can get him back on. Can you hear me? So I guess another question I'll ask is,
why is that?
Oops. And I apologize to the audience here. I'm typing questions to Fabian.
Think.
Okay, do you hear me now, Fabian?
Yeah, I had to reload mine on my side. Sorry.
Okay, so it's okay now? You hear me?
Yes, perfect, and I see you.
Oh, perfect. All right. Well, that'll be a lot easier than me trying to type the questions and and you not being able to hear me. Okay, so that's a good overview of how open source systems like Odoo are different from off-the-shelf ERP systems, and also how it's different from low-code or custom developed solutions. How does an organization know if an open source solution like Odoo is a good fit? What kind of organizations do you find that Odoo is a better fit for than others?
I think organizations don't care about open source and shouldn't care about open source. I mean, open source is just a license. You don't choose your ERP or business apps based on the license. The license is important, but it's not what matters. What matters is that does it does the job for you? Is it complete? Does it covers all you need out of the box? So it's more about comparing product. Open source, in my opinion, is not a value for the end user. It's just a better way to produce software. The value for the end user is comparable with traditional ERP. And because we have this fast development model, we could get to a better value for our clients. But ultimately, what matters for the end user is not that it's open source, because at the end, he does like every other proprietary software. He pays a subscription. He has an implementation service company that does the service. He has warranties on his bug fix and his support. So at the end, it's the same. It's just that we have a better way to produce software in a much faster way, because as you can see with the evolution of Odoo, in just a few years, we are now talking in millions of users. Where when I started, the VCs told me you need 30 days to do an ERP, 30 years, sorry, to do an ERP. And we just did it in a short period of time because of this open and transparent approach.
Right. That's interesting. So what is it, how often do customers make significant changes to Odoo? You know, in that open source environment, one of the benefits I would think is that it has the flexibility to be able to modify the software, change the code. How often do customers actually do that versus just using it the way it's originally built?
So our approach is very similar to the traditional software, where we try to minimize development. Every partner has its own approach, so every implementation service company has its own approach. Some prefer to develop more, others prefer to develop less. We, as a software vendor, we recommend usually more standard implementation based on best practices rather than trying to redo everything. The good thing with Odoo is that we cover so much in standard that we go much further than the traditional ERP just out of the box. So we need less development than traditional software. Like traditional software, they don't do e-commerce, or they don't do business intelligence, or they do with different products that you have to integrate, so it costs a lot. They don't do point of sales. They don't go on social marketing. And with Odoo, all those things are completely out of the box. So when we usually answer to a large client, they have a list of requirements. The others, like SAP and Dynamics, most of the time, they answer with 6 or 7 different software. And they have to integrate things. And so it gets very complex and it costs a lot. With Odoo, it's different because we cover so much in standard, because we have 30,000 apps from the community app store, the largest app store in the world. We can deliver all these things in a single platform. So not only the customer has a better solution because everything is integrated, including his point of sale, his e-commerce, business intelligence, and so on, but also it's much easier to implement because integration costs a lot.
Right. Yeah. So in this case, then, when you have customers that implement Odoo, they don't necessarily need to have a super deep technical competency in-house to be able to support a product like this. I mean, they could still use it sort of similar to how they would use an off-the-shelf system. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it's you're right, and it's actually what we want to do. We want to commoditize the ERP market. When I started, ERP costed a lot of money, even for small company. You had to 50,000 euro, 100,000 euro, even for the small companies. What we want to do is to make it affordable for everyone. And so for that, we need things to work out of the box and to cover all the things that the majority of the customer need. But on top of having all the features available out of the box, we also have like a large app store, so you can use apps from the community. And also Odoo Studio that allows you to customize with a few drag and drops so that you can do customization without going on the development side. And of course, obviously, if you need even more for the very large, when you start to get with 1,000, 2,000 users, we always have developments. And that there you can develop. And the good thing with open source is that we are based on modern technologies. I mean, it's Python, PostgreSQL, so developments are much easier than traditional software.
Right. Now, how has open source, or Odoo in particular, how has Odoo evolved over the years? I mean, what are some of the major advancements you've seen in open source in general, but more specifically to Odoo? You know, since you started the company 15 years ago, what are some of the biggest leaps or improvements you've seen in the
Yeah, every year the product is very, very different. If you have followed Odoo from version 10, 11, it's the gaps are really big. Look at the traditional ERPs from year to year, they always look the same, sometimes with a different design, but you still have these complex bloated things where Odoo is different. The way I see the thing is that a few years ago, 10 years ago, the complexity was to have to manage the business process and to have your accounting data consolidated from all the departments. That was what all the traditional ERPs tried to do. And they did it, and it works well. They support most of the core business process. But the thing is, now we have to go much further. And what we do at Odoo is not only support the business process, of course, is to really have a productivity tools for every employee. We want the worker in the shop floor to be more efficient, the accountant to do less manual recording, or the cashier for retailers that have better tools. And that's where I believe we went much faster than all the others, because nobody's there yet. They are all very painful to use, whereas Odoo is extremely simple and fast, because we focused on that since now 5 or 7 years, while the other were still trying to go on the cloud.
Right. Yeah, that is a big liability of some of those legacy ERP vendors for sure.
Yeah.
What are some of the benefits of open source in general? You know, when you talk about open, and I think you've alluded to this in some of your.
There is still a benefit. So what I said, it's not very different from traditional software as a customer point of view. As a development point of view, it's very different, because we have close to 100,000 people who lives on Odoo. It's their full-time job. So we get feedback from all around the world, contributions, and so on. So as a development point of view, it allows the product to grow faster. But there is still a very big advantage for the customer, is that there is no lock-in. One of the main issues that customers have with traditional ERP is the big lock-in. You never know what's going to be the price. The price might increase year after year. It's not easy to switch technology. It's not easy to find consultant that knows the technology. The thing with open source is that it's taught in a lot of universities, so you have resources all around the world. It's open, so students can learn, or people can learn even without having to be partner with a large name. And also because with Odoo specifically, when you have 80% open source and 20% for a fee, the customer has access to the source code. So we don't lock in for every time he needs something. If, for instance, we are too expensive, he can just ask someone else. And so that creates a pressure on the price, and as a result, the price of the subscription is much lower, because we cannot afford to charge the same price than the others do, because our biggest competitor is our open source product.
Right. And who is your biggest competitor?
It's Odoo Community. So we have Odoo Enterprise that we sell, and Odoo Community is open source product. It's our biggest community. If we lose a deal, they go for the free version. Maybe I should. It's not totally true. Also, when that's for the pressure on the price. On the market, I don't consider that we have a competitor. So obviously, there are plenty of players on this market. There are hundreds of ERPs and business apps and so on. But despite the fact that SAP or Microsoft spend billions of dollars to reach the SMEs market, they all failed. I mean, for the small companies, the equipment rate is barely nothing. For the mid-sized companies, it's 18% equipment rate, despite the fact that everyone tried. So basically, nobody succeeded, including us. We didn't succeed neither. We do less than 1% of the market. So the way I see the thing is that we are not fighting against competitors, because nobody succeeded to make something affordable and real productivity tools for the employees. We are trying to do something that nobody did before. We are trying to make management software accessible, affordable, and real productivity tools where the users save time instead of losing time recording data in a system. And that's something that nobody succeeded to do. So for me, it's not about the technical fighting about a competitor. It's more a technical challenge that we have to crack.
Right. Interesting. Okay. And that's super interesting. So what sort of, so you mentioned that open source is, Odoo in particular, is, you don't notice it any different from an end user perspective. You don't necessarily know or need to know that it's open source versus a off the shelf ERP system. But from a technical perspective, If you do want to make changes to the software, if you do want to add apps or do some integration to other third-party apps or whatever the case may be, what kind of technical competencies do you need that's different from if you were using an off-the-shelf system?
Yeah, the main difference is that all the dependencies and the components we use are open source and well known. So you are not locked in a very proprietary database that costs a lot or different software. Everything is free and accessible. So for the customer or the partners, if they want to develop their own things, they use common technologies, JavaScript, HTML, and not very specific language like ABAP. So because we rely on standard and very common best practice, it's easier for the developers. It's also because it allows us to create the software faster. Our technologies are a bit more modern than the traditional player. Most of the players have very old technology when you have to customize the software, where we rely on Python and JavaScript, which are the two most used language in the world right now.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And by the way, if I know I've got a lot of questions for you, and I'll keep going with those questions. But anyone in the audience, if you have questions on the live chat, please feel free to chime in. I'd love to hear what questions you have about open source, about Odoo, digital transformation in general. So what do you see as we've talked quite a bit about the benefits of open source, how it's different, and how it's similar to call it traditional ERP systems. But what are the risks of open source? In other words, do you ever have customers where you feel like this particular situation, our product is not a good fit, or there's a certain amount of because with that?
The risks are the same than proprietary software. I mean, it's all about doing the implementation project correctly, which is having right project managers, dealing with the change management, avoiding to go too much in the custom development. So it's basically the same kind of risk that what you will get in proprietary software or open source. So that doesn't change a lot. For that part of the business, delivering the service or selling the software, the approach is really the same than traditional software.
Right. Okay. Good deal. And then, so I guess just shifting gears a little bit and talking about a little bit more about Odoo in particular. I know you had a major new release just this month, and in fact, when we were scheduling this interview, we were sort of scheduling it around your release of that product. What are some of the enhancements, some of the major enhancements that you guys have made in this new release that just came out this month?
Yeah, we don't develop new applications because we already cover pretty much everything. So it's more about improving the quality and the efficiency in every application. And so, for instance, now you have a voice conference, voice calls, like you could have in Discord, but directly in the software. So let's say you are in a product and you are in the PLM, product lifecycle management. You change your bill of material. You can chat with someone from the engineering right in the formulary of your bill of materials. And all the things are mapped together. It's fully collaborative. When you write a specification or terms and conditions on a sale order, you see the different people writing with you. So we did a lot of things following the pandemic to be sure that everyone can work remotely and that we support.
Let's see, I appear to have lost you, Fabian. Yep. All right. We lost him temporarily, but it looks like we might have him back here.
Yeah.
You back? There you are. So you hear me and see me okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Oh, perfect. All right. So I'll let you continue with the enhancements you were talking about.
Yeah, so we adapted the software to the pandemic situation where you can manage people that are remote. So you have a voice conference, video conference, live collaboration. So every document people can write at the same time on the same document, like specifications on the task or terms and conditions or quotation. You can have different people writing the same quotes at the same time, and you see the cursor of the others. And we continued all improvement through the different apps, whether it's accounting, inventory, warehouse management, and so on. There are like 5,000 improvements in the release, so it's very hard to say
Right.
what's new.
So more incremental. So you have all the major functionalities that an organization would need, but these are more incremental improvements you're making each year.
Yeah, we already cover pretty much everything. With our App Store, 30,000 apps. It's the largest enterprise app store in the world, so the coverage is super large. We already go much further than traditional ERPs because, as I said, we are in point of sale, PLM, quality maintenance if you are in the industry. We are in the retail with the point of sale, in e-commerce, social marketing, all those areas where traditional ERP doesn't go. So the scope is already amazing. What we want to do now is to improve every user. We want to be faster to record timesheet, faster for an accountant to have a better artificial intelligence that process their bills automatically. So it's more about productivity on every single details. For instance, one of the main improvement I like in the new version is that we saved 30 to 50 milliseconds at every click. It's faster. It doesn't seem a lot, but when everything is snappy as fast in Gmail or Facebook, the user really feel more productive.
Right, right. That's interesting. Um, so one thing that I've noticed about Odoo is it seems like in Europe, where you're based here, I know you're based in Belgium, and a lot of your team is in Belgium. And in Europe, our European clients seem to be more familiar with Odoo, but it's a name that's spreading throughout the world. What geographies are you seeing the most growth right now, just in terms of your product?
The main one and the largest revenues we have is in the United States of America. So we have 500 employees there, and it's the fastest growing and revenue we have today. But at Odoo, we have partners in 140 countries, so it's pretty large. And we ourselves have offices in Buffalo, San Francisco, New York, Dubai, Hong Kong, China. So it's pretty much global. 50% of the resources are in Belgium.
Okay, good. So it's more. It sounds like it's more. You guys are more global and have more of a global presence
Yeah,
than
because it's we everything started and is still online. So we started to answer the leads where they come from, and because we were very much active online, it's very spread on a lot of different countries.
Got it. Okay.
And that makes one of the strengths of Odoo, by the way, because for instance, we integrate with 35,000 banks. We support accounting localization of more than 100 countries. So we are more global than any other players because of that. Being
Right.
Belgium is very bad, I mean, to start a business, because the market is super small. It's very hard. You have to speak 3 languages just for 10 millions of people. But it forces you to be global by default, to be multi-language, support multiple localization if you want to do something.
Right. Yeah, and one thing that's interesting about your global reach is that being an independent and technology agnostic consulting firm, we have the luxury of being able to kind of view all the different systems and the different players in the marketplace. And I would say, if I had to speculate, just in my qualitative observational opinion, the I think Odoo has probably the most committed and passionate ecosystem I've seen. I don't know of any other. I mean, every software vendor has their, the people that are very much they're pro. They support that product. They want to focus on the positives and sometimes ignore the negatives of the products. But with Odoo, it's totally different. It's on a whole nother level in terms
But
of.
do you know why it is that?
No, that's what I was going to ask you. Is why is that?
Because our users love the system. And it's not the case with the others. If you do survey with traditional ERP, the user usually don't like their system. They feel that it's recording data. They are wasting time on the system. There are a lot of things that they still do in spreadsheet. With Odoo, it's totally different. We totally empower the users. So our users, they love. And because of that, we have a lot of fans on Odoo. All these users that really love what they, because it's been a game changer for the company. So for them, it was life and death sometimes. And because of that, they become very passionate about the software and they follow us and help us a lot. We don't do that much of marketing, but we do one thing more better than the others is word of mouth. We really have a community that supports us because they really, really like the product.
That's interesting. Yeah, and I get that positive feedback from customers and clients that are using the product, but also from the consultants and people that are part of the ecosystem. I mean, why are they so passionate? Because just to back up for a second, whenever I say anything negative about any product out there, NetSuite or Oracle, SAP, whatever it is, I'll always get some people that push back in the ecosystem and say, "Oh, that's not true," or that we're better than you're saying we are. But when I say anything remotely negative about Odoo, it's just a different response. Like it's very strong, not just from users, but also people within the ecosystem. So what is it you guys have done to build this global, committed, passionate ecosystem in addition to your customers?
Yeah, we are good at working with the communities. I mean, a lot of software vendors, they don't hear the customers. And so we are good at working with them. We work on GitHub online. It's transparent. We have communities of translators, communities of developers, communities of accountants all around the world. So we are good at organizing and working with communities. But I really believe that the only way to transform users into fans is for them to be very, very happy. And that's what we focus on. We focus so that the users are extremely happy, and that when they start using Odoo, it's a game changer for the company. And I believe that's where the difference is with traditional software. With traditional software, the deploy process, and so the company runs better because of the software, but the user doesn't have a better efficiency because of the software. For us, it's different. All the users are super happy because we really improve their efficiency.
Right. Good. Yeah, that's interesting. So what about who are so you mentioned that your biggest competitor is the free version of the open source system, but what major well-known off-the-shelf ERP vendors are your biggest competitors, or do you feel that you're most likely to be competing with?
I really think that it depends on the market. On the small and the mid-size, I really think that the other competitors, they just failed. And so what we have to do is to succeed where everyone else failed. So it's more a technical challenge. On the large companies, when we start above 500 users, we often see SCP. And when we work against SCP, usually the main issue we have is in the RFI. So you have different steps. It starts with the RFI, then they do a shortlist, and then an RFP, pricing, and then they select someone. We usually lose at the RFI because we are the new entrant on the market. People are afraid of working with Odoo at the beginning. I mean, it's open source. They didn't hear about it. And so usually we are not the favorite one before they saw the product. And then when they select a short list and they select 3, if we succeed to get to that level, when they see what we can do when we do demos of the product, everything changed. So for us, it's not about competing against them. It's just about our issue is to make the world know that we exist. Because when people start looking at Odoo, our winning rates are increasing like crazy.
Yeah, we've seen the same thing with our clients. If customers and potential customers can get past the fact that some of them haven't heard of Odoo, or they have some perceived misunderstanding or negative view of open source, then if you get past that, then it seems like the win rate is very high for Odoo.
And even for the pricing, sometimes it's an issue because we are way too low. Sometimes we lose deal because they think it couldn't be true that it's so low, and they expect the quality to be low because the price is low. It's just our strategy to make ERPs affordable to everyone, but our pricing per user is in the United States, it's $25 per user and per month. The public price. We also have discount for partner, but we start at that price. And in Europe, it's 18 euro per user per month. In Africa, Asia, it's $6 per user per month. So when we show that kind of price to our large players, they're like, "Wow, that couldn't be true." And sometimes we lose deal about that, but we want to stick to the price because we really want to transform the market.
Right. Well, I think it's a good model because one problem I see in the cloud subscription world is that there are so many escalators and things that will increase your cost over time with cloud solutions in general. So I think having that lower price point, it may be shocking to some, it may not be believable up front, but I think longer term, that's going to be a strength of Odoo. Sure.
Low price and transparent price. No hidden cost, no bad surprise. Or for us, for instance, all our price are in one page. You go on odoo.com/pricing and you have the price of everything, the service, the extra. So there is never any bad surprise.
Right. So what about when you look at specific systems in the market? Like I know you mentioned SAP is one that you compete with often for the larger organizations. And you were talking about how if you get to the short list or to the demo process where people see Odoo and then they see SAP, you have a high win rate. What is it? Why is that? I mean, why do you beat SAP in that example? If we focus on SAP, why does Odoo win out over SAP?
I can tell you a story when we are working with EY. And EY bring us a lot of large customer, and we do the implementation. And when we started working with them, they asked us to do demo for them. So they were like, we have this big customer, very specific requirement. Can you do a demo? And so we assigned a salesperson that went and go for the demo. And we did that a few times. And one time they asked us to do the same, but the demo was for the next day. And we had to do the demo for the next day. And we did the demo like we used to do, usual, with limited preparation, just set up the data and do. And we did the same quality of demo. And what EY told us is that, wow, we thought that you were preparing demo for 2 months every time we were bringing a lead to you, because it was so good and so perfectly meets the specification of the customer. And now we see that you do the same thing in 1 day. And actually, every time they bring us a customer, we spend less than 1 day to prepare the demo. It's just that the product is good and we could cover the need very easily.
Yeah, and you don't have to worry about creating smoke and mirrors. You know, a lot of vendors have to create.
Yeah, if you have complex flow, whatever the flow, the others have to use different products, integration, do some customizations just to reach the very specifics of the customer. And usually for Odoo, you don't need that. Sometimes you have to use community modules, sometimes a little bit of studio to customize, but you can pretty much all the time do 90% of the needs of the customer right away. You should try, huh? You go on the website of Odoo.com and you click on schedule a meeting with the sales. You can write your business flow. I want to see that, ask them something very complex, like consolidation, multi-countries, multi-warehouse. And you will see that in 24 hours, you will have a perfect demo according to your need.
Wow, that's interesting. I did not know that. So that's
yeah, you can try on the website. It's usually in 24 hours or 48 hours. You can even pick the hours when you want to demo yourself.
And is it Odoo direct resources that are typically doing those demos?
Yeah, for that. And usually that's for the first qualification of the customer. So we show them the product because that's one of the first things we do as opposed to the rest of the market. We show the product at the first call with the customer. And after that, depending on the need, like if it's a larger customer, we usually work with a partner.
Okay. So we talked about SAP. Now, if we go back, let's go to the lower end of the market, sort of the small and mid market. First of all, for a smaller client, let's just say it's a customer with less than 100 users, let's just say is a rough number. What type of technology are those organizations typically moving from when they buy Odoo or when they adopt Odoo?
Most of the time, they have a mix of different software. They could have Magento for the e-commerce, Winbooks for the accounting, spreadsheet for the inventory. So they have like a mix IT stack of 7-8 different software that more or less integrate to each other, but not very well. And some do, others don't. And so they want to rationalize their stack and change everything. And usually we start one by one. We replace software one by one. So for the small client, we deploy one new application every 2 weeks. So that's the average we do. So for an application for us is if you buy sale, purchase, accounting, inventory, manufacturing, that's 5 applications. So the timing is 10 weeks.
Okay. So do you oftentimes replace like QuickBooks for the smaller side of the market? Is that?
Yeah, pretty much all the time we deploy an American customer, we replace QuickBooks. QuickBooks is very famous on the small companies in the US.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. What about Oracle NetSuite? Is that one that you compete with often in the small and mid market?
In Europe, it's more a failure than a success. So there is barely no NetSuite in Europe. They have some, but I don't even remember having lost one time in NetSuite. In the US, it's a little bit more. Actually, it's fun because we like when NetSuite is in the loop. We really like. Because we know that when a prospect comes and NetSuite is in the loop, the prospect knows the value of the things because they're ready to pay like 7 or 8 times more than what we used to charge. So we know that the sale will be super easy for us when the customer asks NetSuite yeah. So for us, it's quite a good thing to meet NetSuite.
Well, it seems like such a different product too. I mean, it's a much less flexible SaaS product that doesn't. Where you're focused, Odoo strength is its flexibility. NetSuite,
is flexible. That's why we do the demo first, because when you hear the sales pitch, every ERP seems the same and they are all great. But when you look at the product, that's very different. When you see how fast you can do things, deploy barcode in your inventory, or very advanced things in accounting, that's when the customer understands that this is nothing comparable.
Right. Right. Okay. What about Salesforce on the CRM side? I'm just going to go through a few products and just see how you think it compares. When you look at Salesforce CRM or Financial Force on the financial side,
For us, Salesforce it's more difficult than NetSuite when we face them, mostly because they are very strong in marketing. I mean, there are some customers that want to buy Salesforce, even though they don't know everything about Salesforce. They just have Salesforce in mind, and so it's very hard because you have to fight against that. In terms of products, they used to be leader in sales and CRM a few years ago. It's not the case anymore. I believe Odoo or software like Pipedrive are way more sexier and more efficient than Salesforce is, at least for the small and mid-sized organizations.
Right. Okay. And then, looking at, sort of a mid-market manufacturing company that might be considering, say, Epicor, Infor, IFS, one of those mid-tier manufacturing focused solutions. How do you compare, or what are your strengths or weaknesses?
On manufacturing, the key for us is that we do everything out of the box. Like you have the PLM, the quality, the maintenance, the IoT box, so that you can connect the machine directly with the software and the people. And in order to deploy that with the traditional software, it costs a massive amount of money. And for us, all those applications are standard. You can connect your CAD, and all the things works pretty much out of the box. So the way we present to the manufacturing industry is just to show them the modern way of working with tablet in the shop floors, with everything integrated from the quality to the maintenance to the PLM. And that's something that the others cannot do unless they spend a few weeks preparing for the demo.
Right. Now, is there any sort of manufacturer, let's just say a complex make-to-order manufacturer or some other outlying type of manufacturing organization that would not be a good fit for Odoo, or where you feel like there's weaknesses in the product?
We do both continuous manufacturing and or assembly lines or biomedical. So we are active in a lot of different manufacturing businesses. Yeah. If you are asking, the only thing that Odoo doesn't really do is the payroll in human resources. That's the only application where I think we are late and we don't do a lot of countries.
On the payroll side. Yeah.
We are good in HR, but payroll, we don't do it in out of the box.
What about in manufacturing, like that configure price quote process? Is that something that is common or that Odoo can support?
No, that's standard. Very advanced. We have a very advanced product configurators with multi-level variants that impacts directly the bill of materials. So you could have customizable bill of materials where you reuse parts. We even do things where everyone suffers usually, like engineering to order. It's very hard because you have a mix of engineering, and you have to get the cost from the engineering department, which is time spent usually in a single project where you have purchase and manufacturing. Pretty much every software I know suffers in that kind of flow. They also suffers in subcontracting, and those are the flows that are quite easy to set up with Odoo. So I believe the more complex the business process of the company is, the more chance we have to win the deal.
Got it. Okay. Now, what about I'm just sort of working through some of the well-known ERP systems in the market, just seeing how Odoo compares. What about Oracle Cloud ERP, Oracle, in their Oracle Cloud suite of products? How does Odoo compare?
I have not enough experience to compare with them. I know a lot NetSuite, but not their other offers.
Okay.
So NetSuite, I really know it because I worked on it, I tried it and a lot, and I've migrated a lot of customers from NetSuite to Odoo, but the others offer I don't know.
Okay. How about Microsoft Dynamics 365? How does
Oh yeah, that's one. You know how I sell when we are facing Dynamics as a competitor? What I usually do is to give them the free trial of Microsoft Dynamics and the free trial of Odoo, and I tell them, you have to test yourself, because on the paper everyone seems great and you probably think that Microsoft is great because Teams and Microsoft Office are great, but you have to try the ERP before giving that to your users. And so one of the first things I do when I know that Microsoft Dynamics is in the loop, I send them the free trial to Microsoft Dynamics. Only a few people know that they have that. You You have to look on Google because it's not on the main page of Microsoft Dynamics. And I send the link to both free trial, Odoo and Microsoft Dynamics to our customer or prospect, and I'll tell them test that, and then you will see by yourself.
Right. Got it. Okay. So what do you see as the, and I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this question, so I apologize for going off script, but where do you see the ERP enterprise software industry headed in general? What are some of the major trends you see or things you're watching on the horizon?
Yeah. In order to predict the future, you have to understand the past. So let's look at the past first of what happened in the, let's say, the operating system. It started with Unix, Minix, Dr. DOS, MS-DOS, BOS, and so on. And fast forward today, there is only Linux and Microsoft Windows and iOS. And then came the word processor. You had Lotus 123, it works, WordPerfect. Fast forward today, only 3 are remaining. I believe management software are higher up in the stack. They are way more complex because not only you have the technical complexity, but you also have the business complexity. And because of that, we are at the same level that operating system or word processor were 15 years ago. We are still in an environment where we have pretty much a lot of players. These players are not mature. It's painful to use their software. And they are consolidating and buying each other's. Everyone is trying to buy its competitor right now. And we are still at this phase. And I believe that in the future, I don't know if it's 5, 10, or 15 years, it's going to be the same. Only 3 will remain. And it's going to be a commodity market. You will use management software like you use Word or Excel today. And so my goal for the future is just to survive, to be in this tree.
So what do you envision Odoo potentially selling to a larger vendor at some point in the future, or do you envision a future where you remain independent and you become a potential contender for that standards?
Odoo is not for sale, and I can guarantee that myself because I own the majority of the shares. And so basically, we want to continue focus on the long term. So we will never do an IPO. We don't plan to be listed. We want to stay independent, to stay open source. We don't work for the money. We just have fun transforming the world, and we wouldn't trade that having a massive impact on millions of companies for a big bunch of money. So no, there will be no sale, and we don't acquire neither. It's the way we work. We build rather than buying, and we want to keep our own company culture. So we are not looking to acquire a company neither.
Right. What about let's talk about technological trends like AI, robotic process automation, things like that. What do you see as the big technical trends or things that you think could be game changers for Odoo and for other systems in the market?
It's the future, but it's not the future the way people think it is, I believe. It's not as important as what everyone says that AI is the thing. I mean, for the mid-sized companies or the small companies, they will barely use AI. So of course you have AI here and there. Like in Odoo, we have AI to process your bills automatically. So you scan or you get the PDF and we record the data for you. So all those things are important, but compared to the rest of the software, it's small details. I believe the real revolution in the ERP industry will be to have a software that makes the user more efficient. Not a software that they hate using, or really a software like, a lot of my time is to sit next to the user and check how they work. That's what I do a lot. I'm more product owner than a CEO sometimes. And I'm always surprised that any job position, they spend more than 30% of the time on tasks that you could avoid. Like buyers in a company. The buyers, that they spend more than 30% of their time to do follow-ups. Every time they send a code, they phone to be sure that they received, they record it in the system. And then a few days before receiving the product, they call to be sure that the product will arrive. Otherwise, it's very painful for the manufacturing line. And these guys spend 30% of their time just doing follow-ups. But follow-ups can be massively automated. Every time you send a quote, you ask the supplier to click on a button to confirm he registered his code. You can automate an email 10 days before receiving the product. All the things are automated today. And it's the same for pretty much every position, like a recruiter. Recruiter spend 35% of their time just scheduling meeting. They have to schedule meeting with the interviewer, with the interviewee, and then reschedule. And when you look at their mailbox, 35% of their time is just scheduling meeting. Scheduling meeting is something that nowadays is fully automated. You send the link, The link knows everyone's calendar and they schedule, and that's it. And if they want to reschedule, they don't need to call the recruiter. So we want the recruiter to focus on what they do good, with just talking to people and not spending time scheduling meetings. And that's the way. That's where I think is the future of management software, is to help these guys to be more efficient by avoiding everything we can avoid, all administrative tasks, repetitive tasks, reports they do manually, and things like that.
Got it. That's an interesting perspective, especially the way you tied it back to productivity tools, 20 years ago, and the evolution of Microsoft products and other productivity tools. That's really interesting take on the enterprise technology space, because I had not thought of that as a trend, but I think that makes a lot of sense.
We have to focus about the employees, not about the business process and the company. And when we start trying to do tools for the employees, everything changes. And you can really decouple the productivity of a company if you give better tools to their employees. If you support the business process, it's just the minimum. You don't make your company more efficient.
Right. So I guess as a way to sort of wrap this all up and tie everything together that we've talked about so far, just being the CEO of the company, and you've been in the industry a long time as well, you supporting your product, but you also know your competitors, and you see a lot of transformations in the space. What words of wisdom would you give to an organization that's about to start either a software evaluation or an implementation of sorts? What are some 2 or 3 major words of advice you'd give them?
One of the main issues we have is that companies are totally efficient, and most of the time they don't even know it. They are doing the same thing since 10 years, and for them it's normal that the recruiters spend 30% of their time in scheduling meetings. And so we spend a lot of time educating the market. And most of the companies, they don't want to change because they think that it costs a lot of money. They really think that they don't want to start very complex projects spanned over 1 or 2 years. And so the main advice I have is that no, everything changed. Everything is more mature, technology is affordable, we can deploy things very fast. It's cheap, 18 euro per user per month. So the main advice I have is just for them to test and check what exists. They can do a free trial. They can even start and test on their own.
That triggers another just a follow-up side question is, when customers buy Odoo, are they typically buying the entire suite of products, or are they usually starting with CRM or e-commerce, just one piece of it?
It's a very, very good question, because that's also what makes the difference between us and the rest of the markets. We don't consider ourselves an ERP. We are more a suite of business apps where we have different apps, but if you get all these apps, they fully integrate to each other, so you have an ERP. And we have 50% of the clients we have who did not start it with an ERP vision. They needed a CRM, or they needed an accounting software, or website, or e-commerce. And you can use Odoo just for one app, and it's very easy. It's not like traditional ERP. You wouldn't use SAP just for CRM. And so we have 50% of our customers, they start with just one application, and 50% come with a more strategic ERP vision. And that's funny, because for the large clients, like above 1,000 users, most of the time they were using Odoo before deciding to switch their ERP. So when they do their RFP for the ERP, most of the time we come to them and say, hey, by the way, do you know that your HR department and your manufacturing department are using Odoo for that and that purpose?
Right. So it's almost like you're bridging the gap between the trade-off or the decision that companies often have to make, which is, do I go with a single ERP system, or do I go with the best of breed app?
Exactly. Yeah.
You're sort of doing both.
Yeah, I think it's a question of the past. You don't need anymore to choose between best of breed and ERP. No, you can, because technologies are more mature, you can have both of them.
Right. Yeah, very interesting. Well, good. Well, I appreciate your time here today, Fabian. This is a really good conversation, and I've learned a lot by chatting with you, and enjoy having you here, and I'd love to have you back on the live stream and the podcast at some point in the future.
Yeah, I'm here if you need me.
All right. Well, congratulations on growing a disruptive, innovative company in the industry. That's one thing I like about Odoo, is that it is disruptive, and you're sort of challenging the industry norms and doing things a lot differently than other software vendors. So that's why this is a really interesting conversation. So thanks for being here, and thank you to the audience for listening. And if you have questions for either of us, you know how to reach us. What's the best way to learn about Odoo? If I'm listening to this recording or this live stream, how do I learn more about Odoo?
Just go to the website and schedule a meeting with one of our experts. In the form, you can choose the date and the hours you want the meeting. You write the business process you'd like to see, and then you will have a demo on how it works on a modern software.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Sounds
And
good.
by the way, Eric, thank you for your content. I've watched a few of your content. It's great content too for implementation service companies.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I knew you listened. Actually, I referred to you in a previous podcast episode, and you responded, which I thought was very interesting. I basically was saying I would love to have you on the show sometime, and then you emailed me and said, "Okay, I'll be on the show." So that's good to know you were listening and paying attention. So good. Well, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. It was a good chatting with you, and thank you to everyone joining us here today. Again, we do these live streams. We try to do them once a week, either on Fridays. Sometimes we've been toying with the midweek format, but we stream these on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. And if you have any suggestions for guests or topics, I'd love to hear from you. And we're going to repurpose this interview, by the way, in our upcoming episode of Transformation Ground Control, which is a weekly podcast that I host that's released every Wednesday. So a week from this Wednesday, we'll have a full episode of that podcast that will include this interview that you just heard. So if you missed any part of it, be sure to check that out and share it with colleagues and whatnot. So have a great rest of your Friday, everyone. Have a great weekend. Thank you again, Fabian, and we will see you all soon.
Thank you.